let's look at running backs.
Sure.
J.K. Dobbins is, of course, the headliner. If we take it back to that transition between 2016 and 2017, Urban Meyer's thought process has always been to have that workhorse guy, Zeke Elliott, Carlos Hyde. J.K. Dobbins burst onto the scene following a Mike Weber playoff game against Clemson that wasn't stellar. He had a couple of fumbles, actually had some decent runs, was the only semblance of offense the Buckeyes had in the second half in that game. But J.K. Dobbins burst onto the scene, has the huge game against Indiana, and then it's like, well, he's the guy. Weber's a good complimentary guy. Dobbins is the guy. He's got it all. Has the big year as a freshman. And then last year, and of course, Weber had his injury issues and then actually filled in very well and capably at the end of 2017 as a compliment to Dobbins. And then we hit last year, and Weber just took off. He looked like a dominant back much of the time that he was on the field, and J.K. Dobbins took a step backward. Now, the offensive line obviously plays into that,
Sure.
but Dobbins is really looking for a reemergence here after averaging just over 4 yards per carry, which at the collegiate level at a place like Ohio State is really marginal.
Yeah, it was certainly a step back for J.K. Dobbins last year. And it'll be very interesting to see this year with Mike gone. You know, as you mentioned, J.K. took over that role in 2017, but once Mike got healthy, he was able to, at least be that complimentary. They, rotated them a lot, especially last year. So J.K. Dobbins spent this spring doing two things that he talked about a lot. The first one was he wanted to get back to the things that were working for him as a freshman. He felt like he was trying to make too many big plays because he didn't know when he was going to be in and out of the game. So knowing that he's going to get the ball a lot, he wants to kind of get back to what worked as a freshman and not thinking so much about, the big explosive plays every time you're on the field, just doing his job. And then being ready for an increased workload. He's, physically wants his body to handle, more carries than he's probably ever had for a player who was injured his senior year of high school. He knows, how these things work. So he wants to make sure he can stay healthy is kind of the long and the short of it. He's, been focused in the weight room and whatnot. And they worked this spring to get him stronger, to get him, more fit for that workload, but also limited the amount of carries and stuff that he had during practice. We didn't see him a ton in scrimmages and whatnot. So they want to have him ready for the fall, but also have him ready to handle the workload. And I think it's going to be a big year for him. Over 1,400 yards as a freshman, still got over 1,000 yards last year, which is good. And, I think he can become, if I'm not mistaken, only the second player since Archie Griffin to do 3 straight 1,000-yard seasons for Ohio State. I'm pretty sure I saw that somewhere. But yeah, so, he's certainly accomplished a good amount during his Ohio State career, but he wants to have a big year this year. The Buckeyes need him to have a big year this year. They have some complementary pieces on the roster, and a DeMario McCall who's been around the program now for a while but hasn't really emerged. He's kind of that athlete that we were talking about earlier that can catch balls out of the backfield and can carry the ball. I don't want to make it sound like he can't. I think he's kind of a complementary role. And Master Teague was a freshman last year, played in a few games, still was able to redshirt. He's more of your bowling ball, short yardage type of guy. And so JK is your prototypical back, and I think he'll do the bulk of the work. And you got a new quarterback coming in, Justin Fields. You don't have a lot of depth at quarterback. While Justin Fields can run the ball, I don't know if you want to have him take the hits. So if J.K. Dobbins can be your dominant workhorse and they can move the ball on the ground the way they did 2 years ago, and you mentioned with names like Ezekiel Elliott and Carlos Hyde, if they can get back to that, complementing that with the passing game we were talking about earlier, and J.K. Dobbins is having a big year, then I think Ohio State's offense is going to be just fine. But the running component needs to be there. Last year it was, a problem when they got in the red zone. They weren't able to finish drives nearly enough. A lot of that comes down to offensive line, but the running backs have to do their part as well. So yeah, it should be a big year for J.K. Dobbins. And I think he's doing all the right things to be ready for it.
And Patrick, it seems as though even though McCall's not a focal point of the offense and never will be because of his size and just the style of play that he brings, his health and his emergence in the offense could drastically change how plays are called, because he's a guy that needs plays called for him, and they're much different style plays than others. People have compared him to Justice Hill of Oklahoma State as a guy that can be a game changer, a game breaker, but it's not going to be 25 carries.
Right.
It's going to be 8 carries, 4 pass receptions for 75 yards, and he broke one for 40 for a touchdown, and that kind of deal. But he just hasn't. We keep hearing about him, and we see him in flashes and spurts, but not usually in important games. And he could be a guy that really changes the look of this offense.
Yeah, the biggest thing for him is going to be health. He was out for all of the spring. We didn't see him in the spring game at all. And, I think he was getting back from an injury. They wanted to make sure he's 100% back. So going into fall camp, he's ready to go. But he's had injuries during his career. He transitioned from being a pure running back when he got here to that H-back role, that hybrid position for Ohio State. And that never really worked for whatever reason. And last year he was back more as a running back, played a little bit, not a ton. And, like you said, he could be, a difference maker in a different role when J.K. Dobbins needs to come out, when, they're in certain packages, things like that. We've been saying this around Ohio State about Demario McCall for a few years now, and it just hasn't happened for one reason or another. Another area that he could be pretty impactful in is in the return game. He's as you said, kind of an electrifying player. Ohio State hasn't really made big plays in either the kick or punt return game, and Demario McCall's a guy who could help change that in 2019. So, even if he doesn't have a big role in the offense, if J.K. Dobbins really gets rolling and they just let him go, maybe he becomes that return guy and then fills in spot duty, and like you said, with certain plays and certain packages.
8 carries, 50 yards, 9 catches, 110 yards. So if we see this, let's say against Nebraska on the road in a big game for one game, that's Demario McCall. That's what it should be. No, that was the 2018 season. So that was the entire season right there. That's what a game should be for him. Maybe the 9 catches a bit of a stretch, but you get the deal. Master Teague's a great name.
It is.
So if he can do anything on the field, people are going to be gravitating to cheering for him. Can we expect him? JK needs a break. Is he going to be in the 5 to 8 carry range, something like that?
Yeah, I could see that for sure. And I kind of labeled him as the short yardage back a little bit earlier, but he can do some other things. And we saw it a little bit last year when he gets out in the open field. He's got some speed. It takes him a minute to kind of get up to top gear, but once he does start running, once he really gets going, he's not slow by any stretch of the imagination. He's certainly strong. So, I do think he could be that number 2 back, come in, gain some experience when JK needs a break, or in late game situations when Ohio State's up big, get him out there, let him get more experience. I think he played in 4 games last year, so he did get a little bit last year, but now you're not trying to hold him back for red shirts or anything like that. He's maybe not an elite running back, and maybe he develops into that, but he's certainly got talent. He could certainly be a complementary piece this year, and just kind of see how he develops. Like I mentioned, though, I think, if they still struggle in those short yard situations, maybe that bigger body, you put him in down by the end zone once you get in the red zone, and, just let him kind of plow up the middle there. So, it'll be interesting to see how they use both Demario McCall and Master Teague as kind of complementary pieces to J.K. Dobbins. And then they've got 2 true freshmen this year, Marcus Crowley and Steele Chambers, both decently high recruited guys. Crowley comes out of Florida. He actually made a rise late in the process. He was, I believe, the Florida Gatorade Player of the Year. And as his senior year progressed, more and more people kind of took notice of him. He's a guy that, again, could be late game situations type of player. Steele Chambers is a guy that is athletically very good. I think there's still some debate about whether he'll remain at running back as his career progresses, but that's where he's at least going to start, it looks like. So they do have some depth at the position, a decent amount of young guys in there that'll be hungry for sure. But like I said, I think this is going to be the J.K. Dobbins show, and you'll see some of these other guys when they're needed.
There's your Ohio State running backs breakdown, courtesy Patrick Murphy from 247 Sports Bucknuts. Patrick, first time here. Enjoy the conversation and the insight and the information. Good stuff. We appreciate you stopping by.
Absolutely. I had fun.